Welcome to another dry run, but this time it's not film related. Well, not completely. It's this. Who's afraid of the big bad retro? Mars in Aries retrograde, September 10 to 14 of November 2020. So here I am again in my favorite box. It's my small, snug box where you won't see me, you won't see my, wrinkles or my pores. And I just wanted to do this as another dry run. Yes, that's the initial reaction when people find out a planet is going retrograde. But I hope because of this small talk, I can, change your mind and not make you nervous, concerning the incoming Mars retro. Or maybe I'll just make you more hysterical. Who knows? Let's just go to this whole thing. So the Mars Retro, as I mentioned, starts on September 10th, this Thursday, which is the start of which is the starting day of my classes at UPFI, and it's going to last until 14 November of 2020. So that's approximately 2 months. But the actual period of effect, if you include what they call the shadow of the retrograde, would have started on the 25th of July 2020. That's around the time we had that solar eclipse, which was viewed from the Philippines. And that solar eclipse capped a period of three eclipses in 2 months, which is exactly what's happening to us. Very significant times. If you include the shadow period, this Mars retro will last not just in the up to the middle of November, but until the beginning of January. So we'll explain that more. So before anything else, what's wrong with the retro? How come people hate it? So this is a still from a film called Biglang Yaman, an LVN Pictures 1959 film. The lady in the center is one of my favorite Filipino actresses, Rosa Rosal, and in front of her are Tugo on the left and Pugo. One of the more successful comedy teams of the pre-war era in vaudeville and early films. Unfortunately, Tugo passed away, and but Pugo made it still after the war and continued to have a fantastic career in television. Okay, with Tang Tarang Tang and these other beautiful sitcoms. So retrogrades 101. Retrogrades are apparent uh, experience phenomenon. They seem to be something else, but they're not. It seems like a planet is moving backwards in relation to the fixed stars. And this only happens if you observe the planet's movement from the point of view of the Earth, which brings up the idea of a geocentric or Earth centered framework, or a heliocentric or a sun centered framework. If you look at it from the point of view of a person living in the sun, no planets move backwards. But from the point of view of the Earth, there's this phenomenon. So the best analogy to the retrograde movement of two planets is to think of two trains that are moving forward. One train is moving faster than the other. The faster moving train, once it surpasses the slower moving train, it would seem that the slower train is moving backwards. So that's exactly the experience of the retrograde, because in reality, there's no such thing as a backward moving planet. So, and another thing that we need to know about retrogrades, it's a regular phenomenon, as in, as regular as our weekend. So 5 days of work and 2 days of letting go. So in relation to this idea, what's the big fuss about retrogrades? If they're regular, why are we so scared of them? I'll show you how regular retrogrades are. So Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year and approximately 2.5 weeks each time. Venus turns retrograde every year and a half, and it lasts about the retrograde of Venus is about 40 days. While Mars, the one that's happening on Thursday, happens every 2 years and 2 months, and it will last for 10 weeks. So, as I mentioned, it's going to last until the beginning of January. While the rest of the planets, the outer planets, as they call it, Jupiter to Pluto, they're retrograde most of the year. Like for example, Jupiter is retrograde for about 3 4 months, while Pluto is retrograde for half the year. Para sa akin, retrogrades are really fun. I think it's exciting that you have this phenomenon that's only observable from the planet Earth, and that says a lot about human experience. And aside from being kind of fun, I think they're strangely beautiful. If you plot out the retrogrades of the planets, you would have this mandala. For example, if you plot out the synodic movement of Mercury from one retrograde to the others, you would have this heart-shaped mandala. And Venus is as beautiful. It's a five petaled plant, and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. So if you look at retrogrades from a different point of view, they're actually very beautiful phenomenon. So aside from being beautiful, I think retrogrades, they talk about the infinite order and balance of our universe. And the picture you're seeing in the middle of the screen shows you, the sun and all the planets around it with their synodic retrograde movements. So why the bad press, folks? Why? Maybe it's because, people hate to be distracted from their distractions, okay? Human beings always want to be on top of things. And we hate to be torn away from our snug little boxes. We hate to be torn away from our small territories in the overall scheme of the hive. So we think retrograde periods are times of doom because they take us away from our pinagkakaabalahan, our concerns. Or at the very least, just plain annoying spells. So Mars, this particular retrograde is focused on Mars. So for example, a Mercury retrograde is a totally different animal from a Venus retrograde, is a totally different animal from a Mars retrograde. Let's look at who Mars is in the first place. So Mars is called the bringer of war. Okay? And in almost all the pantheons of the world's history, Mars has a place because remember that the deities of ancient mythology, Greek, Roman, Babylonian, Norse, etc., they talked about gods were represented archetypal principles that talk about the human experience. So Mars represents a certain archetype. So what archetype does Mars represent? So on the positive side, Mars represents courage, physical strength, energy, the ability to do and act on things, passion, desire, and initiative. But on the negative side, Mars represents hot-headedness, anger, overexertion, hyperactivity, rash and impulsive action, lustfulness, bullying, violence, and cruelty. So each planet would have positive and negative aspects depending on, particular situations they're in. So along with Saturn, Mars is considered one of the more malas planets in a chart. Okay? So Saturn you could say, is an opposite of Mars in the sense that it symbolizes limits, the stop sign, structures and systems, and it rules ambitious and cold Capricorn. So Capricorns and Saturn-ruled people are very thoughtful. They're kind of devious, but not as devious as Scorpio. And they always like organize things or planning things. Okay, so systems. Samantalang, Mars represents, lukso ng dugo or, drive and passion or doing things for the sake of doing it or just being in movement. So Mars could be seen, if Saturn is a Father Time, very slow and ponderous. Mars is like a newborn baby, a fresh ego. It doesn't know anything else except its drives and its passions. Okay? So you could say that Saturn and Mars represent two sides of a pole, fire and earth, hot and cold, and the go sign versus the stop sign. But properly harnessed, the Mars Saturn combo in a chart is hard to top or stop because it represents energy that's driven with ambition or energy that is not expended widely everywhere else but is controlled. So the nice thing is, folks, during the coming retro period, starting September until November, we have an interesting aspect between the two planets, Mars and Saturn. They shall form a square, a 90-degree aspect, sometime in October. Actually, this is the second aspect out of three that's being formed between these two opposing energy planets. So the first one happened in August 25. And the last one, the last square between Saturn and Mars, will happen in January. So square aspects, folks, they represent challenges. They represent points in our lives that we have to make a decision and not just decide, but do something about it. Because the energies of the planet are raw, and it needs both planets in a blend need a constructive outlet, or else they explode. So what's most interesting about the incoming Mars square Saturn is that Mars is in its own sign Aries, which makes it doubly mainit ang ulo, and Saturn is in its own sign Capricorn, which makes it extra restricting. So very archetypal. This happens, folks, on September 30. In the Philippines, it'll happen at 5:49 a.m. Okay, so just watch out for the days before and after, and you'll see a lot of that going around in the outside world or maybe even your life. Ika nga ng ate natin, no? Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. Speaking of which, do you know that Betty Davis is an Aries? And let's look at this quote from her. Okay, I wanted to be the first to win 3 Oscars, but Miss Hepburn has done it. Katharine Hepburn. Actually, it hasn't been done, etc., etc. And then in the end, she says, if they gave me an Oscar, I would just throw it back in their faces. You see, I'm an Aries. I never lose. And another favorite Aries would be none other than Mr. Pogi, Marlon Brando. And he says, an actor's a guy who, if you ain't talking about him, he ain't listening. So both of these quotes exemplify the me firstness, the egocentricity of Aries. It's easy to think that Aries people are just plain selfish folks, but actually that's their charm. We need people who are like children. They're very innocent when they do things, when they say things, and when they hurt people, they don't really mean it. They just blurt it out, and that's the beauty of an Aries. So, just two of my favorite Rams. Okay, I think I need to stop at this point because I need to cook lunch. I'm doing frank and beans, veggie frank and beans today. And we'll talk more about the details of the Mars stationary retrograde chart in a few shakes. But if you're kind of impatient, folks, I posted this on Facebook yesterday. So if you want to survive the upcoming 2 months, these are the things that you strive for. And avoid knee-jerk reactions or decisions. Curb your impatience or your enthusiasm. Just relax and treat yourself gently along with others. Another thing about Mars retro, since the energy is moving inwards, try to burn off all the excess energy that's going to be, building up as productively as you can. Do yoga, or jog around the block, or something physical. You need to sweat. And the last advice, which is my general advice for everything in life, is to switch off, meditate, and just breathe properly. And so That's it, folks. And my mom, meron akong klase. That's my virtual mom, as I mentioned. So maybe I'll see you later and wish me luck. That's my mom again. That's my virtual mom in prepping for my classes that start on Thursday.